Hey guys, I know. Usually I'm like by myself, and our expert is somewhere else, wherever they live. But this time, my expert lives where I live. So I asked my friend Catherine, let me just make sure you guys are here and seeing us because it'll be here. Turn off the sound before it's too loud. There it is. Good, perfect. So I asked my friend Catherine if she would come by and if she would do what she does best, share. So I met Catherine, when did I meet you? 2011, I believe.
Yeah.
So what happened was I was dead broke.
What happened was
I was dead broke. I just started the Budgetnista, really just started kind of like moving toward creating the Budgetnista into a professional brand. And my mentor at the time, I told her, I've run out of money. My sister says I have to move out of her and not sleep on her couch anymore and get my own space. Thanks, Tracy. Right. And she said, so my mentor told me that you need to get contracts. And I was like, well, okay. And literally that was it. She was like, I got to go, girl, but you need to get you some contracts. That was literally the extent of her. And so it was crazy. I was like, oh. And so what I did was I emailed my whole email list inside my Gmail account and basically said, hey, my name is Tiffany. I teach financial education. I'd love to do it for your organization. And so who was the woman that was there before you? Brooke. So I didn't know her personally. Yeah. And so she must have been in my email list. And so I emailed, and no one emailed me back except for Catherine, who said, the woman you're emailing no longer works here.
The woman you're emailing no longer works here. And what is it that you do?
Yep. And that was literally it. And I was like, I teach financial education. I was like, oh, great. And then because Catherine, you had just started the job.
I had just gotten promoted. So I started in June of 2010 of being the program specialist. Okay. And I had to teach financial literacy, and I was not good at it at all. And I was looking for somebody to come in and teach it, and I contacted some banks, and that didn't really work out too well. And then I saw your email. So
perfect timing.
In April of 2011, I got your email, and that was the same time I got promoted. And I was like, well, let me see if I can hire her.
Yes.
And kind of like pass it off. And so you came in and did a class with us. Yeah. Remember?
Well, when I first came in, I remember just at like a one meeting with Catherine. We literally like hit it off. Yeah. We ended up laughing and joking. And then I brought my book, The 1 Week Budget.
That's right.
And I actually helped Catherine with her budget on the spot.
You did?
Yes. And you were like, that was good.
Yes.
And you were like, so this is staying ready. And so I know we're like, what does this have to do with grant writing? We're getting there.
Yeah. Right?
And so literally this is what it was when we first met. We didn't even know each other. And so I was helping her with her budget. I didn't have any money, but I said, you know what? Do you want my book? And so I gave it to her. And I remember you were like, you know what? This was good. Could you do this for my employees?
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And I think you had me come back the next week. And I think you paid me maybe like, I want to say $150, maybe $300 to do it. So I came ready. I remember I bought folders and
they were all green.
Yeah,
I was like, this girl is all about green.
Yes, because green was money. Yeah. And so I remember like just organizing and making sure that I wanted my presentation to be really tight. So I spent like $30 of the money that I didn't even have yet to make sure that, when I came back to present to her employees that I was going to do a good job. And so I remember you telling me later that the employees who'd missed it were like, oh my God, I heard it was so good. That's not fair.
Yeah.
And you said, could you come back and do it again?
Yeah.
And I said, okay.
Right. Yeah.
And then from there, Catherine said, you know what? We've got this program where we get money from a bank, and then banks give money to people who are part of this program called the IDA program.
Right.
The Individual Development Account program.
Yeah. It was actually United Way who matched the money.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
So they had to save $1,000, and then after they saved $1,000, we matched it with $4,000.
Yes.
So we actually had it was a federal grant at the time. And it was my job to really design and run the whole thing. And so that's when I said, well, we need you
to teach it,
to come in and teach financial education. And that's part of the requirement.
She didn't know that. She was like, so do you have a program? I was like, yeah. Meanwhile, I didn't have a program. Yeah. She's like, how many weeks was it? I remember you asking on the spot. I was like, 6. Meanwhile, I didn't have a program. And you were like, well, submit me a proposal. I said, sure. Meanwhile, I didn't know how to write a proposal. So I tweeted out to the universe, like literally a tweet, help, I have to write a proposal. I don't know how. And Michelle Thomas, I don't know if you know her, but she used to be the communications director for the city of Newark, where I live. And she saw my tweet. me what you have, and I will put it together in proposal form. It's the same proposal that I still use to this day.
That's really funny.
And the ones I sent to all my friends. That's really I put together this proposal. Catherine hired me. Working with the United Way and Catherine believing in me was a pivotal moment, because up until then, no one had really paid me to speak.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize the difference working with an organization like that was going to have in my life. Because once people found out that I was working with the United Way, it's like one of the top 10 most recognized brands in the world. And people I didn't have to get vetted as much, because they were like, oh, you work with the United Way? Catherine says you work with the United Way. Could you do something for us? So all of a sudden, I started getting more and more contracts. And so I just wanted to kind of tell you the backstory of how I met Catherine, and how, she from there, and this is just another kind of lesson. Well, one of the lessons is just that you never know, reach out. 2, come ready and prepared, And 3, that how a genuine friendship can develop into something that's mutually beneficial, like as far as professionally. From Catherine, I just really learned, because Catherine, she's gonna be modest, but she is an amazing writer. And as a result of her writing, she has yielded millions of dollars for the organizations that she's worked with. Millions with an M. And I wanted her to come tonight. How is this possible? So I don't know, Catherine, you want to give a little backstory of on yourself, or kind of kind of where, what's the education that you have, and then we're going to take some questions.
So I have a bachelor's degree in communications with a concentration in professional writing. So when I was in college, I was actually a newspaper reporter, because I was putting myself through school. So I worked part-time as a newspaper reporter. And then when I graduated, I didn't really like doing that too much. But a long story short is I ended up then getting a Master of Social Work at Rutgers. And from there, I decided I wanted to work for United Way. And that's when I went to become the program designer.
Okay.
And as I said, my boss left and her position was open, and I was promoted. And a huge chunk of that job was writing the grants to support the programs for the organization. And I had never written a grant before in my whole life. And the first grant I wrote, obviously, was declined. And I think I lost the organization $8,000, with another project mistake. I was like, oh my God, I totally stink at doing this. But I kept doing it, and I kept meeting with different funders and understanding what they were looking for.
So let's pause for a moment. Lesson 1, get her first grant. As a matter of fact, she lost the organization money, but she kept trying, right? Lesson 2, she met with funders and asked, what is it that they're looking for? Right. So I want you to catch some of the things that she's saying. She realized, I'm not a funder, right, to what their specifications are. Let me ask. Okay, so keep going.
So really, when I was talking to funders, I really wanted to understand, what is your funding strategy? What are the programs that you want to fund? And I think that's, one of the questions is really what's the number one thing people don't know about grant writing?
What's the biggest mistake that people make?
Right. What's the biggest mistake people make? And I think the biggest mistake people make is that they think they have this amazing program and a funder should fund it because it's an amazing program. But funders don't fund programs. Funders fund outcomes.
We're going to say that again. I need somebody to type this in the comments.
Right.
Funders do not fund programs.
Right.
Funders fund outcomes.
That's
what does that mean?
So that means that if I am, for example, the Prudential Foundation, and my funding strategy is to increase the number of students who go to college, right? They don't care whether I do a painting class or a backpack program or a financial literacy class. What they want to see is that at the end of the day, your program shows that those students are heading towards applying for college and graduating, right?
So it's that outcome. So if you're wanting to match what your outcome is with what a funder's looking, what an outcome a funder's looking for. Okay.
That's right. So it's really not about, you could have a book distribution program, or you could have, we have, the whole financial empowerment center, and people are like, well, why don't that? Well, there's certain outcomes that there's a niche of funders who fund that.
Okay.
So that's the second most important thing, is to know your funders, right? Do a lot of research to understand who are the funders in the niche of what the outcomes are that you're looking to do.
Critical.
Very critical.
Yes. I think, it's such a like an aha moment, because you don't really think about that. And it seems so logical, but like, you don't, I know when I first started, like just even teaching financial education, that, you think everyone should just give you money.
Yeah.
No, but if their outcome is, well, we want more kids to travel abroad, how is the Live Richer Challenge going to help each person like get closer to traveling abroad?
That's right.
If it's not, that's not the funder for me.
That's right.
That's not the funder for me.
That's right.
So find funders who, like, meanwhile, my outcome might be to raise people's credit scores. So I should look for funders who are looking for folks for their credit score to raise, so they can say, look, we helped 10,000 people raise their credit score.
That's exactly right. That's an outcome.
Okay.
Right? 75% of your participants raise their credit score. That's huge. There are funders who want to fund that.
Exactly.
Right?
Okay.
That's what they're looking for. So you might be very emotionally tied to your program and say, this is the best way to do it, and we do this amazing thing. And you might be doing that. But remember that a funder really wants to fund the outcome.
Okay.
And that's what's really important.
Okay, we're gonna take, is there a place to go? This is Kalila Wilburn. To go where you could get a list of funders and outcomes and what they want to fund.
So that would be the really easy thing to have, right? That would be like a miracle. If there was a list somewhere of the funders based on geography with the outcomes they're looking for. But this is really where you have to do your homework. Depending on where you are, if you're in the New York region, if you're in, Atlanta, if you're in Colorado, you really have to go and start to research. Just start with Google. Honestly, funders with the zip code. A lot of states have Council of Grantmaker organizations. I know New Jersey has a Council of New Jersey Grantmakers.
So you would Google Council of Grantmaker organization.
Right, with your zip code.
Okay.
There's also some very, very, very cheap grant databases that you can, Google grant databases, and, maybe for like $30 a year, you can go in and search by what is it you're trying to do? Serve youth, serve older people, soup kitchens, whatever the case may be. So you've really got to do your homework on this.
Is there a grant database that you use in particular or no?
Of course there is, and I can't remember the name of it.
Well, I'm going to get it from her later, and then I'll share it. Okay.
Yeah. GrantWatch. That's what I use.
So GrantWatch.
GrantWatch. It's a paid subscription annually. It's probably less than $100. I really don't remember the cost of it, but it's not very much money. And you can literally go and search grants by the types of initiatives that you're looking for.
Okay. So somebody asked again, Council of...
So like, for example, in New Jersey, there's the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers.
Okay.
There may be one in Colorado or, other states where, I'm just coming up with Colorado off the top of my head, where you can literally go and find a bank of grantmakers. But then you have to go to those individual grantmaker websites and see, is there... For example, with Prudential, the Prudential Foundation, you can go to their website. They're telling you what they fund. They have a full strategy about what they fund. A lot of corporations have, their funding strategy is outlined right on their website. Okay. So this is the part where you actually have to start digging really deep to figure out what it is that they will fund.
Okay. So yes, Council of Grantmaker, yes, Laverne, MAKER. And then GrantWatch is the database.
That's right.
Let me see. Okay, so Caliente Queen says, is there a standard format for the proposal?
Each grantmaker has their own format that they want you to use.
Okay.
So, for example, in the tri-state area, there's a few funders that use what they call
tri-state. So we live in New Jersey.
So we live in New Jersey.
New York, New Jersey, Connecticut.
Connecticut, right. They use the Common Grant application. So there'll be a link on their website, and that'll take you to their grant portal. A lot of grants go through, especially if it's a corporate grant, it goes through a grant portal that you go into, log in with, and complete the application.
Okay.
The second thing that's really important that I want to tell you about a lot of corporate grants is that you can't actually apply until you've been invited to apply. So this is the second part of grant writing that's really not about writing at all, and that's really about relationship building.
Okay. Wow, I didn't know that. So sometimes you have to be invited to apply.
That's right. So for example, you can't just send Prudential a grant application. You actually have to reach out to them, meet with them, talk to them about what the program is that you're doing, what those outcomes are that you're looking to get, and then be invited to actually apply for the grant.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. You don't really think about that. So do you think that smaller organizations have a chance then?
Yeah, absolutely they do.
Okay.
Sure. Because if you can still show, look, we're getting some of these outcomes that you're looking for, or we propose to get some of these outcomes you're looking for, you definitely have a shot at that.
Okay, so don't worry about being small, because I know I would think that like, well, I'm not gonna beat out. So what Catherine is saying is, one, it takes sometimes networking beforehand, so they know you, they know what you're up to.
Exactly.
Two, understanding, is this company and their giving strategy in alignment with what my outcomes are.
That's right.
Are their outcomes and my outcomes the same?
That's right.
That's right. Then three, finding the grant portal or wherever it is that you're going to submit your grant.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let me see. I'm going to take some. So here's a question I have. So what are the components of a grant? Because you were telling me today, like budget, so I don't think people really know that, because I know I don't know. So what are some of the components of a grant?
So every grant has very standard components.
Okay.
The first is they want to know a history of your organization.
Okay.
Like, what have you been up to?
So one, history.
Yeah. Two is, what is the need that you're trying to solve?
Okay.
Right? So that's where you've really got to get some of your data and your statistics around, how many youth are dropping out of high school, how many of them are not employed, what is, the drug use rate, whatever it is, that problem, that social problem is that you're looking to solve, you've got to have some data on that.
So one, history of your organization and what you've been up to.
Yep.
Two, data and what the specific problem you're trying to solve.
That's right. And then the third is, what is it that your program does, right? You've got to be able to clearly and succinctly say that in writing. Here's what we do. We meet 6 times in a cohort, right?
Mm-hmm.
We offer these 6 classes. We cover these financial topics. And here's, how many participants we seek to serve in each of those classes.
So for specifically, maybe you want 4.
Yeah.
For specifically, how are you going to solve that problem that you just outlined?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the fifth one, which is really, to me, the most important part of the grant application, is your outcome section.
Okay.
Every grant wants to know, what are the outcomes and how are you going to evaluate that?
Okay.
If you don't have that, don't apply.
Okay.
Just don't bother.
So what do you mean by what have you done in the past, what the outcomes are?
So what are you proposing the outcomes to be?
Okay.
And how are you going to evaluate your program to be able to say, okay, we got these outcomes?
So give me an example.
So for example, if I was going to talk about, your program in financial literacy, I might say the outcomes we seek are 25% of our participants increase their credit score, 30% open a savings account, 50% understand how to make a monthly budget, right? We evaluate that we conduct a pre-test and a post-test to show what the gains are in terms of knowledge. And then we do a 3-month follow-up survey to find out from our participants, okay, what are you doing 3 months from now? The class has ended, you're on your own. What does that look like? That is an outcome and evaluation, sort of layout.
Okay.
The other thing I know somebody asked about online is a logic model.
Okay.
You can do a logic model.
What's that?
A logic model is simply a map for your program.
Okay.
It's very complex.
Okay.
In some cases, it's easier. I've taught a whole class just on logic models.
Okay.
So I can't really go into all the details now, but maybe that's a future. How do you actually do that?
Okay.
You can also Google logic model, and it'll show you all the components that go with it.
So a logic model is just like a model of how you really map out.
It's really a logical map of, okay, here's the inputs to your program, here's the activities, here's the outputs, and then what are the actual outcomes, whether they're short-term outcomes or long-term outcomes.
Okay. So now we know 5. 5 is like, okay, exactly what specific outcomes are you going to deliver, and how can you measure? Like, how are you going to prove that you met those outcomes?
Exactly.
And then what else?
Exactly.
Parts of a grant.
So then the 6th part is usually the last part, which is the budget. And there's usually 2 types of budget. The first is the overall organization budget. And that's really important.
Okay.
And then the other one is your program budget, which is also just as important as the organizational budget, because funders want to know, okay, where is that money going?
Okay.
Right? If I'm giving you $20,000, what are you actually going to do with that? Well, I might pay my staff people, and I might buy supplies, and I might offer some travel reimbursement. Whatever that is, you've got to be able to lay that out for them.
Okay, so budget. Okay, so you guys know the 6 components of a grant. That's actually really dope. Okay, so Sabrina asked, can you talk a little bit about nonprofit startups that do not yet have measurable outcomes? What advice do you have for new orgs looking for funding?
So I would say, not to put a plug in for United Way, but I would say I would talk to your local United Way.
Okay.
I would reach out to them. They're fairly easy to get in contact with and just say, look, I'm a new nonprofit. I don't have outcomes yet, but here's what I'm actually looking to do. A lot of United Ways have resources in terms of helping to start a nonprofit. They have resources, many do, to provide some local funding or startup money. The other thing is you can also Google like nonprofit startup money, right? Who are some of those funders, whether they're local to you or national, that provide seed money? Because if you say, we don't really have the outcomes yet, but here's what we want to do, it's really important to be able to talk about that.
Okay. Oh, see, that's also Sabrina, local United Way, or Google. You said nonprofit
startup money.
Startup money. Okay. And then too, like for example, let's just say, for example, someone like me. So I don't run a nonprofit. My company's a for-profit, but I might want to do something. Somebody might want to donate to me, but I'm like, well, girl, I'm not a nonprofit. I could partner with a United Way. They receive the money.
Yeah.
You know, use some of it for operations, and then pay me out of that. You know?
That's right. There's a technical term for that. It's called a fiscal agent.
Okay, a fiscal agent.
A lot of times, either the United Way or the community foundation of your community, there's a community foundation of New Jersey, they can act as the fiscal agent for you to do that.
So just know that, like, so if you're someone who's like, you want to give back to your community and you're doing something great and you have the outcomes, but you don't necessarily have the nonprofit backing, and you know someone's wanting to give to you, you can partner with a legitimate, obviously, fiscal agent.
Yeah,
you know,
make sure it's legitimate.
Yeah. All right, I'm in DC. We did our grant research at the foundation on K Street. Oh, okay. So I guess somebody asked a question.
Okay.
All right, I'm in North Carolina and want to start a nonprofit teaching how to coupon and budget reaching domestic violence shelters. Oh, that's great. In low-income families. That's great, Rachel. I was previously a victim forced into a new start. Okay, so Rachel, what's the question? This is your platform. Rachel, if you have a question, ask specifically, and we'll definitely love to help you out. What do you look for when looking for a grant, Mildred?
What do you look for when looking for a grant? Well, I think that's really important. Like, we're really looking for us, when I look for a grant to fund our programs that we're currently running, I start with the outcomes in mind, right? So I think about who are those funders, either nationally, regionally, or locally, that are looking to support outcomes around financial empowerment, people increasing their credit score, the banking, getting people banked and savings accounts, people who want to be homeowners, start a business, those types of outcomes that they're looking for. That's what I begin to do. And I use a lot of Google. I mean, I'm going to be honest, it's free. You go in it, like funders looking for, certain kind of outcomes. That's really what I begin to look for. And then I look to see, well, how much money is it that they're really offering? Because that's really important too. You don't want to spend a whole lot of time trying to grab $5,000 when you could put the same amount of time and grab $25,000, right? So be smart about the amount of time you're spending and how much money are they really offering you. We get a lot of grant, offers around, well, we could give you $1,500 or we could give you $2,500. To be honest, that's not really worth my time because I think about how much it costs how much I make per hour. It's not cost effective to do that. So in the beginning, when you're first starting, that's one thing. But Catherine is the CEO of the United Way. So at the point where she is now, it doesn't make sense for such a large organization to go after $1,500. Yeah. Because she can literally use that same energy. Like, what's the I don't know if you mind sharing, but what's the largest grant that you got awarded from your work? $4.7 million. This is why I had her on, y'all. Right? $4.7 million. That's insane. Yeah. When literally, you said, what was it, like 6 or 7 years ago, the first grant you were, they were like, yeah, that's cute. No. Yeah. As a matter of fact, you lost the United Way money. So I'm sharing that because I want you to see that this is really, you have to practice at this. Yeah, it is. It's an art. It's a practice. It's, like I said, the funding your organization through grants is really a twofold process. The first is really, as I said, looking at those relationships that you have, right? Funders love to have, funding is all about relationship, just like a lot of things in life. It's all about who do you know and how do you cultivate that relationship. And if you're not talking to your local funders about what you're doing, they're not going to know. So if you send in a blind grant application, they might say, well, that's cute, but
Who are you?
Who are you,
yep.
right? So, and if you don't know them and you're trying to get an appointment, get to know the people who do know them. Network all the time. Look at your local United Way. Is there a way we can get into and have a meeting with, ask your friends who are in nonprofit. And if you don't have friends in nonprofit, make some. Find out where those nonprofit people are having conferences or they're getting together or they're talking about best practices. Your local university, that's a huge resource.
Okay.
Just like begin to do a lot of exploring and research in that area. So that's the thing. There's really two components. It's that relationship building and getting to know your funders and them getting to know you. It's a twofold relationship. And then the second piece really is writing the grant. But I always describe it like this. Writing the grant, at the end of the day, if you've already got a relationship and you've already worked out what it is they're going to fund, that's just literally the contract.
Yep.
That's the contract
it's
at the end of the day.
Because think about, like I told you guys, for those of you who are here from the beginning, when I first met Catherine, right? We're sitting in a room, we're laughing. I'm like, oh, let me show you how to budget real quick. Like, that wasn't the point of the meeting, but we ended up talking, and she was just saying, like, oh, I've got all these student loans.
I did.
And I was like,
I
well,
still do, but yeah.
But I remember we talked about it. I was like,
did.
girl, let's just whip this out. And
I was in the red every month.
yes, and you're like, I just don't understand. I know I make enough. I said, you probably do. And we literally worked. I didn't realize at the time, but we were building a relationship. I had never met her before. But I was like, I like her.
Yeah.
Let me do a session. And so as a result, that relationship went from come speak to my staff for $150 to a 6-week long course that I wrote, to them ordering books for each student in that course, for me doing that course upwards of like 3 or 4 times a year. I mean, it grew tremendously. And then on top of that, the organizations that now hired me as a result of, we heard the United Way hired you. Like, that's an organization that we trust. And if they trust you, we trust you. All of that from an email and sitting and meeting with Catherine and just being myself. Someone wrote earlier, well, what if I don't have a bubbly personality like you do? You don't have to.
You don't have to?
You don't have to.
I'm not always this bubbly.
Right? Catherine is probably a little bit more serious, And so it's don't worry about that. Just being yourself and creating relationships as you. You don't have to worry necessarily about that. All right, let's see what. Let me try to scroll down to the bottom, then we'll scroll up. Let's, okay. Can you write? She said, "Can you write me a grant?" Wow. That $4.75 million got you, huh? Okay, so this is a good one. So would you describe yourself as an introvert or an extrovert?
I'm an introvert.
Okay, so this is perfect.
Yeah.
So Jessica says, any advice on networking for introverts?
I would say, okay, this is really hard for us, right? Because we like to stay at home and we like to just be in our comfort zone, but really you don't grow from that, right? You don't grow until you're uncomfortable. I think the best thing advice I can offer you is try to find a middle person. If you're not comfortable cold calling or sending an email, that's another great tool, by the way, for introverts, is just send an email and say, hey, like, I'm doing this. Is it possible we could meet sometime? And also, the first meeting you're having shouldn't be about asking for money.
Yeah.
It should be about, I'm trying to build my nonprofit and this is the service. Do you guys have any resources other than funding that I could look to, and begin to get to build that relationship.
Okay.
But for introverts, what's really important is sometimes there's a middle person that you can work with that maybe you have a relationship with already that can introduce you. Keep it short, keep it sweet. Don't take more than an hour of their time.
Yeah.
Don't come in with some fancy like PowerPoint and have to hook up to their technology, right? You've got to like keep it really short and sweet, but push yourself a little bit outside your comfort zone and practice what you're going to say. That's also really important for introverts because they get nervous and we get, oh my God. We're not really always good at connecting with people. So practice what you're going to say before you actually go in and say it.
No, that's good too. Because I mean, as much as it's weird that I feel like I have definitely, obviously, I'm an extrovert, but I have largely introvert. I have some characteristics in where I do get really shy. I know it seems weird. Like when I'm in a big group, I'm not as much, but when it's more intimate, I'm literally in the corner by the cookies. Like I'm just gonna eat these.
Yeah, that's how I am too. But I don't have that luxury anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So now that I'm the president, I really have to go out there and force myself to talk to people. And so what I do sometimes, like if I'm in a big room, even if they're funders, and I know somebody, I start with the people that I know. And if I don't know anybody, I force myself. I literally say, okay, your goal tonight is to meet 2 people you don't know.
Okay.
Right? Pass out your business. Make sure you have your business card.
Okay.
Hand it over and begin that process. It's painful.
Yeah.
Trust me,
awesome.
I know it's painful and it's terrifying, but you meet people that way, and it's really good.
I think that's really good advice. Trisha says, you don't grow unless you're uncomfortable. I love it. Yeah, right? Nervous indeed. Okay, somebody, so this is a good question from Linda. And Linda, I'm a social entrepreneur too. Can social entrepreneurs that aren't nonprofits also get funding?
You have to go through a nonprofit.
Yep.
You really do. So if there's funding that you want to go with, you really should find a nonprofit you can partner with to act as your fiscal agent, as I said. In many communities, like I said, it could be United Way, it could be a community foundation that you have, it could be another sort of what we call community development corporation, and they should also align with your social entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah.
So Tiffany might partner with United Way. Well, that's great because we run a financial empowerment center. But if you're coming in and saying, you know, I want to teach kids how to build tractors, our United Way probably isn't the nonprofit.
Exactly. So looking for that. And I do, like, you know, when people come my way and want to offer something, I always think to myself, like, well, I don't, like, I'm not a nonprofit, but I could partner with one. I could partner with the United Way, and I know that they're going to trust them. Because, you know, you don't say the United Way name. People are like, they're like, oh, okay.
Right.
You know?
Right.
All right. So Dream Life Dancer. I'm about to submit my paperwork to become a 501c3. I found the property I need for the nonprofit. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Should I buy this on my own? Oh, or should I wait until I'm a nonprofit? It might be gone by then. I don't know if Catherine.
I'm not really an expert in that. I would say
you want to talk to your lawyer.
I would definitely talk to your lawyer, and if you don't have a lawyer, contact your local law school because they often work with people who are trying to start nonprofits.
Yeah, they do.
And they give free pro bono advice. So that's somebody you would want to reach out to.
Yeah, like for example, here, Catherine and I both work like around Newark, and so Newark has Rutgers University, and they have a program where the students actually will work on getting like if you're wanting to be a nonprofit. My friend Eddie Omi, I don't know if you know Eddie Omi. She has this company or this nonprofit because Eddie Omi has sickle cell, and so she has a nonprofit surrounding kind of like sickle cell education, and so the Rutgers students helped to get her nonprofit. Their 501c3 status. And so like definitely like reaching out to your local university and you can possibly get free help.
Yeah.
All right, let me see. Jessica's talking about being nervous. My job raises a lot of money for the United Way. Where do you work, Demetria?
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that is fantastic. This is great information. Oh, thanks, Monique. Okay, so this is a good one from Sade. How did you get over that first failure? I'm feeling a little insecure about writing grants.
Well, for me, it was fairly easy because I was getting paid, right, to do that. And if I didn't get over it, I was going to lose my job. But I think one of the things that I did is I just kept practicing. I just kept sending grants, even if it was grants that I maybe knew we weren't going to get or didn't qualify for. I just kept practicing that. Writing it out.
Okay.
But I also reached out to people in my support system. Okay. And I was like, listen, like I keep sucking at this. Like, what do I do? And, you know, sometimes you just need your tribe to say, you know what, you can do it. It's okay. You can do it. And so that's what I did. And I also had a boss who, you know, he would take me to meet with different funders. So I began to get to know them. And you know, that really helped. And then that first grant, I couldn't even tell you which one it was, but whatever it was, that first win, like that was all I needed.
And now you're like, I got it.
Okay, I got it.
There's a formula.
There is.
So once you start to recognize that, you're like, and it's so crazy now because Catherine and I were talking like before, you know, this, and it seems so obvious now, like, duh. Like, I'll give you an example. So when I first started the Live Richer Challenge 3 years ago, I reached out to different people to sponsor. So similar to funding, but it's for-profit, right? So they call it sponsorship. So I reached out and I was like angry, like, oh, y'all don't want to get on board? Meanwhile, I had no outcomes. I had nothing but an idea. Like, you don't want to fund this? You don't want to sponsor this idea? And it's not until now. It took me 3 years. And so this year's Live Richer Challenge, so I was funding the challenge out of pocket. This year's Live Richer Challenge, I had 2 years worth of this many women opened up bank accounts, this many people raised their credit score, like all of this data, right? So that's important too. You have to collect the data, all of this data. And so this year, 3 years into paying for the challenge out of pocket, we got a sponsorship for $30,000 from one sponsor. I couldn't believe it. And I feel like we could have got more because when I said 30,000, they were like, okay. I was like, wait, I mean 50 or whatever. We learned, right? But that's because I could show, one, we were in alignment with what they wanted to do. Our outcomes were the same with the outcomes they wanted to see. And two, I had data to show we've been doing this. So I think this leads us into our next question for you, Catherine. Dolores says, can she link her nonprofit with her for-profit? I don't know if you know this, but
I believe that you can, but you still, again, have to talk to an attorney to do that.
Yeah.
I believe you can. A lot of social entrepreneurs who have a for-profit company end up having their own nonprofit company as well.
That's where I'm headed toward, too. So I'm going to be talking to you.
Yeah.
Sade, there are thousands of logic models to choose from. You should Google a logic model similar to what your organization's outcome is. That will help narrow down yes. Sade, that's definitely great advice. That will help narrow down what logic model template you should choose. Okay. Someone said, oh, thank you. I needed that info. So Mildred, what do you look for when looking for a grant writer? So do you guys have grant writers for the United Way?
That's me.
You're like me.
But I'd really like to be able to contract with some grant writers in the future. I think really what in the future we'd be looking for are people who've had successful experience, people who understand how to find the grants, how to write around the narrative about the outcomes and evaluation, how to do the budget, but also people who may already be connected to some funders.
Okay.
And understand, how that process works. And if they're not connected, at least understand how the process works.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I do want to say, as a disclaimer, that again, not every grant I currently write, I get.
Okay.
Right? So that's important too, to remember, like, once you start getting them, it doesn't mean you're going to get every single one every time. Because sometimes it's still like it's not a fit. Even though for me, in my mind, it might have been a fit. For the funder, it just might not be a fit for them. Yeah.
Speaking of which, did we ever get that grant?
Which one?
That one where it was like the technology finance one. Was it? I don't remember who the funder was. It was like earlier this year. You were like,
no, I'm gonna have to look. Yes. See, that's how many there are. I can't remember.
No, because Catherine reached out to me and wanted to partner because there was
Oh, yes, I know the funder you're talking about.
Okay.
They didn't like the technology idea.
Really?
They didn't find that to be innovative. See, so this happens.
Yeah.
This is what happens, right? Like a big funder will reach out to me and say, we want to fund something innovative. And I reach out to Tiffany and I say, what you're doing is incredibly innovative to me.
Yeah.
Right? And then I pitched it back to the funder, who I have a great relationship with. This was our second grant with them for the year, by the way, because they wanted to do something. They gave us a grant already, and then they wanted to do another pool of funding. And they were like, no, that's not innovative enough. And I was like, okay.
And it's okay.
And that happened.
Yep. And it's okay.
Yep.
Okay, let's see. So Monique, can new organizations apply for grants, or should they wait 1 year or more when they can show a history of successful outcomes?
I mean, I think that's really a personal choice, but you're probably going to be more likely to get funding the year after you've started.
Okay.
So wait that year and then apply. But don't come back and say, well, Catherine, you told me not to apply, and I could have gotten funding. So I think it's really a personal preference. And it's also, again, knowing who your funders are in your region.
Well, let's see. You guys are asking really great questions. Let's see. Let me see. Would you be great? Okay, so I Johnson says, would you suggest getting education in a certain field to prepare? My degree is accounting.
I mean, I'm going to say the best degree you can get is in writing because that's really important. But that may not always be the case. I think understanding social problems, so a degree like sociology or social work is very, very helpful. I don't know how accounting could be advantageous, other than, you're going to be able to write the budget fairly well, but you've also got to be able to put all of your ideas together in a narrative. And that doesn't mean that you can't.
Yeah.
I just don't know how your accounting degree helps you do that.
And so you might partner with someone. You bring the financial component, and this person is a really great writer. And together you crank out grants for your nonprofit organization. Don't ever think that you have to bring every skill set to the table.
No, not at all.
All right, let's see. Bass says, Martia says, my 8-year-old daughter got a grant from Disney, to get kids reading. How do we turn this idea into nonprofit? So sometimes people will give grants even if you're not a nonprofit.
Sometimes people can get individual grants, but I'm not as familiar with those because I don't necessarily work in that arena.
Okay.
I think when you think about you got a grant from Disney to get kids reading, I think the idea is, so there's a difference between having a program and having a nonprofit.
Okay.
And I think that that's really important because a lot of people get caught up in, oh my God, I have this great program, right? I want to start a nonprofit. But let me tell you, like, not every program needs to be an entire nonprofit. You might want to approach, again, some of the larger nonprofits in your area, whether it's United Way or a community foundation or some other community development corporation in your area that may be doing work in literacy. They might be doing work in education, and you have this great program idea to move forward with that.
That's awesome.
That doesn't mean you shouldn't start a nonprofit if you want to put all the time and the effort into doing that, but if the idea is you want to get kids reading, that's one program
that could be part of a larger
nonprofit.
That's a really great idea.
So maybe your nonprofit is to focus on kids literacy. Well, that's great, but there has to be a larger outcome other than, well, we want kids to read.
Exactly.
You want kids to read so that they graduate high school, go to college, and be successful in that way.
So it might just behoove you, Martia, at least to start. So you can get up and running to say, hey, we already have this relationship with Disney. Let me go to my local larger nonprofit, my local United Way, and say, hey, we've got this relationship. Because I know you guys do Celebrity Read.
Yeah, every year.
So what is Celebrity Read? So Martia can...
So we have a program called Celebrity Read where every February volunteers go into the schools and they read to students for the day. And we get, somewhere between 200 and 500 volunteers every year, and we reach over 10,000 kids every year. But that's one program in a trio of programs that we have to support children's literacy. So the other program that we have is called Raising a Reader, where we work with pre-K students and their parents to help them begin to learn how to read. And then the third program is really the program with the largest grant that we've ever gotten at the $4.7 million, where we literally distribute books to kids throughout the city of Newark. So again, there's not just one strategy that we use. There's a whole bunch that go into that. And again, that's just the literacy component of a large nonprofit.
I was going to say. So Martia, you might really want to think about that, like before, jumping into creating a nonprofit.
Because it's a lot of work.
Yes, partnering with one that has a larger outlook and saying, this is a program that I can bring that already has funding.
Yeah.
And they're not going to turn you away. You already have funding that you came with, Sade, glad you're giving this advice on how to personally communicate when networking. I'm an extrovert and I tend to talk too much. This is helping me to stay focused on what I'm talking about. Sade, I can be there too. How do we get to oranges? I'm at this business thing talking about, and then girl, the oranges are so good. Wait. Let me see. Yes, Kalila, it's called a fiscal partner.
It's a fiscal agent.
A fiscal agent.
Yeah.
Fiscal agent. So a fiscal agent
is a nonprofit that has a 501c3 status, which is really just a tax status, but it's really important.
And so that's a nonprofit that if you are not a nonprofit and you're wanting to still receive money from a funder, you can partner with them and the funder will pay the nonprofit and the nonprofit will pay you.
And that doesn't mean that the nonprofit doesn't get their cut.
Yeah.
They have to have
they have
to have something that they get out of the relationship. Yeah. So typically, like for us, it's somewhere between 10 and 15% of whatever it is that you get.
And that's great because that's 85% more than what you were going to get because the organization could not give you money personally.
Exactly.
All right. So let's see. Thanks a bunch. My family wants to hold an event Thanksgiving of this year for the first time for people in need of a meal. May becoming a nonprofit organization eventually. Is this something we could get funding for?
That really depends on your geography and where you are. And again, whatever the funding strategy is for the funders in your area. I know in Newark that's not necessarily something that the funders want to fund, but it's something that you could partner with the community food bank on and begin to really think about how do we turn this into a regular sustainable program. Okay.
Trisha, I have a girls empowerment program and it's incorporated. Would it be best to move to a 501c3 or keep it as an incorporated?
I think honestly, Trisha, that really depends on where you see getting your funding from. Are people going to pay to have that program? Are you going to have participants who pay to be able to participate in your program? Are you really trying to get funding through grants? Again, that's really a personal strategy that you have to think through, and it's probably a good idea to talk to a lawyer.
Okay. So yeah. Laverne, I want to do a nonprofit for food pantry as well. Do I need to write a grant to grocery chain?
Again, I would really reach out to the community food bank and see, because you may not even have to get funding. I know locally our community food bank sources local food pantries with food.
Okay.
So it's important to find out who's already doing whatever it is in the subject area that you're looking for and figure out how you can partner with them to do that. So
partnership is critical. Really because the more people that you partner with, then larger funders are looking. I remember a funder, because I work with with Prudential, not like in a for-profit space. But one of the things they used to tell me is when people were reaching out to them and their foundation for money is that they look for, unless you're already like a huge nonprofit like the United Way, they look for partnerships because then they know more people are invested and that you're going to be able to really affect the community in a broader sense.
That's a really good point. This is like the second most important thing I can ever tell you about grant writing. When you submit a grant to a funder, they should not be the only funder of your program because they're not going to fund it. No sole funder wants to be the only funder to fund your program. When our United Way used to give grants to organizations, what we would look at to see is how much of what we're giving you is part of your overall budget. It should be no more than 20 to 40%.
Okay.
So no more than 20 to 40% of your total program budget should come from one funder.
Wow.
They're not going to fund 100% of your program.
Okay.
That's just not realistic. They want to see a partnership. They want to see that you've got Prudential, you've got Horizon, you've got other PSE&G, whoever the corporations are, or the family foundations in your area are also contributing to this program.
Wow, that's critical. So no one funder wants to be the sole funder of your event.
No.
Okay.
No.
Wow. Okay. Tina, do you recommend taking a grant writing class?
I absolutely recommend taking a grant writing class. If you can find one, take it. It never hurts to have more education about the subject.
So Jessica, would you say seeking sponsorship is a similar process to seeking funding for a nonprofit? I couldn't say it because I've never been a nonprofit, so I have not sought funding. So, and I don't know that you've ever sought sponsorship.
No, I don't think so.
So, but from sitting with Catherine and hearing her speak about it, it sounds very similar in that aligning your outcomes, showing that, showing proof that you're going to be able to achieve those outcomes, creating, like I've created, the one thing that I will say is that for sponsorship, they don't ask me for my budget. Meaning they're not necessarily saying, well, Tiffany, how much are you going to use for the website? They're not interested in the budget, but that the financial piece that I show at the end is more so, this is what platinum sponsorship will get you. This is what gold sponsorship will get you. This is what silver sponsorship will get you. So that's the financial piece that's different, is that I'm not showing them what my spending looks like. Instead, at the end, I show them what, if you spend, what you get.
It might also be important to remember too, like a lot of times with sponsorship, my understanding is a lot of brands want to be the only sponsor. They want
a title sponsor.
Yeah, a title sponsor. Like that's what they want.
Yep.
But again, I'm not as familiar with that.
Yeah, so it's different. There's some of the mechanics are the same, but yeah, it's definitely different. How to link nonprofit? Oh, well, we already spoke about that. Would you say some areas are more prone to funding than others? For example, North Jersey versus South Jersey.
I don't know. I don't know for sure. I've never worked in South Jersey in this arena. So I'm really not sure.
Yeah. Okay. So Shantae, good information. This is something I have been wanting to learn about. Awesome. Do you recommend getting a grant editor or someone to proof or double check your writing if in fact that makes sense? Oh, I never thought about a grant editor.
Yeah, I think it's always helpful to have someone read it over, make sure you don't have any spelling, typos and that kind of thing. That never hurts, but it's not always necessary. Once you get really good at it, you don't usually have other people read it. Because other people don't really want to read it.
Yeah, it's a lot, right?
It's a lot. It's a lot.
So Caliente Queen, she's like, oh, this was key. That was your moment of clarity, which is programs versus nonprofit. Ask yourself, is this just a program or is this really a nonprofit?
That's right.
Right? Because a lot of times, like even because for sponsorships, typically no one is sponsoring the Budgetnista. Yeah. They're sponsoring a program. So sponsorship typically are for specific things that I'm doing, you know, like they'll sponsor the Live Richer challenge. You know, they might sponsor, for example, an Ask the Expert. I might have an expert in here and it's a bank or whatever, and it's a bank that I really love, and then the bank comes to talk about whatever. So they sponsor this specific Ask the Expert versus no one sponsors the whole Live Richer Academy. So you have to ask yourself, are you sure you just don't have a program? Which is great, but that's not the same as a nonprofit. You might want to partner with a nonprofit to get your program some funding. All right, JJ said, I'm enjoying this really good information. I know, girl, I only bring the best. Mildred, okay. I've had my dance organization for years, registered with the state 3 years ago, became a 501c3 in May 2016. Congratulations. I've added 4 more programs. I'm considering.
Am I considered?
Oh, and she considered new.
You know, I would say, even though so this is really important. 501c3 is a tax status.
Okay.
Okay? But you've been operating your programs for the past 3 years. So those are all outcomes you've got.
Okay.
It doesn't matter when you got the tax status.
Okay.
It's just the tax status means you get to get funding as a nonprofit, and it's also how you file your taxes as a nonprofit organization. But you've already got those outcomes, so use them to your advantage. Definitely.
I love that.
Yeah.
Leslie, I have contacts. Everyone loves my nonprofit's purpose and idea, but I'm still struggling to find funding. It probably goes back to the beginning.
Yeah.
So Leslie, you might be confusing outcomes for, what was the other thing you said?
Versus outputs, or
no, it was something in the very beginning that was like, oh, you said people don't fund
your program. They fund your outcome.
That's what you're having trouble with.
So whether you have, you know, a cooking class that you give to underserved youth, whether you're teaching them again how to paint, self-portraits, whatever it is, they're not going to fund a program. They want to fund the outcome.
So Leslie, you might not be illustrating your outcome well enough. Although people love, because who doesn't love a good program where you're helping people? So they might be like, oh my gosh, Leslie, that's so awesome. But are you illustrating, this is the specific outcome that I'm going to reach, and then matching your outcome with the funder who's wanting that same outcome? All right, let me see. We're just gonna take a few more questions, guys. So if somebody just has an idea and they wanted to start a journey toward a nonprofit, what's a good kind of like just some beginning steps that they can do? Should it even be to like go get registered, or are there some things that they can do?
I would say the first thing is, who else in your area is already doing that?
Okay.
Because part of the problem that we have in Newark, for example, is we have 1,500 nonprofits.
Do we need all that?
In Newark, just in Newark, 1,500. So that's the first step is anybody else in your area trying to either deliver that program or get to that outcome? So if that's the case, then who are they, and do you want to partner with them? If not, then the second step you really need to do is talk to a lawyer, because the thing is, you really need to file that 501c3 paperwork in order to get that tax status.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is to really begin to think about, okay, well, how are you going to deliver? You have a great idea, right? But how are you going to deliver that program? Do you have staff? Do you have an office? Do you have resources to be able to do that? If you don't, maybe you do want to partner with another organization for a while until you can get enough funding to do that. And then, of course, as I said, do your homework. Start to research your funding. Who's going to fund that in your area?
And if you really just want, like, because honestly, a lot of times I think people are like, they see a need, like someone said before, that they were a victim of or survivor of domestic violence, and you see a need, and rightfully so, because you got this amazing heart, you're wanting to help. So my friend used to always ask me, what is the desired outcome? Like, so if the desired outcome is to help these women, I don't want you to wait 3 or 4 years before you get the funding. If your desired outcome is to do that, you might look to partner with the United Way and say, look, this is something I want to do. No, I'm not a nonprofit, but I'm really passionate about it. And they might be able to be like, okay, if you bring the sweat equity, all that stuff, we can support you in this way. And then, like I said, the United Way receives the funds and helps to support you, whatever it is that you're doing. Because remember, like, well, I don't know if I've said this, but when I taught financial literacy with the United Way, so I was doing every a 6-week course that I wrote and I taught. I'm not a nonprofit, and yet they paid me. But when people came to my class, they felt like, wow, Tiffany is giving back to the community, because my desired outcome was to teach my community financial education in a space where they're going to be respected, they're going to be looked after. And so that's why in the beginning, I thought I wanted to be a nonprofit, but I realized, no, I just wanted to give to my community. Mm-hmm. And so I realized that if I could partner with an organization that was already doing that, I didn't have to go through all of this creating a nonprofit. No, I am a social entrepreneur, which means that my business's focus is to be of service to my community. And so I found a nonprofit that was in alignment with that, and they paid me to go out to do that. So you might not need to be a nonprofit. Instead, you might be looking to really start a business and align yourself with nonprofits and other organizations that are looking to pay you to do that good work. I mean, I've gotten money from banks. I've gotten money from, like I said, Prudential has paid me to go into the community. So I don't need my nonprofit status. I'm a for-profit business.
I think it's also so important to remember, and this is really a technical term, mm-hmm. It's a hustle.
Yeah.
Like, it really is a hustle.
Yep.
It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time and a lot of homework. Mm-hmm. So it's important to remember that. I just saw a question on here that I really want to answer.
Okay, go ahead, yeah.
Which is, Leslie asked, corporate grants versus government grants, which are best for nonprofits?
Okay.
There's really no right answer here, but I do want to talk a little bit about the government grant side.
Okay.
Government grants are extremely onerous. Mm. They take a lot of time to write. There's a lot of paperwork involved, and there's also a lot of accountability that you have to continue to track your outcomes through the life of that grant. So it's really important to remember that while the government may be offering you a lot of money compared to what maybe a corporate funder might offer you. So for example, when we got the IDA grant, that was $430,000.
Okay.
It was the largest grant that our nonprofit had gotten to date,
okay.
right, at the time. But there was so much accountability and compliance and submitting budgets and year after year after year and meeting with the program officer and having site visits at the risk of being audited. So just remember that with great, what is that saying?
I know, with great power comes great responsibility.
That's right. Yeah. So with a lot of funding comes a lot of compliance. Yeah. And you have to remember that.
Okay.
So I'm not going to say that one is better than the other. Government grants are also harder to get, depending on what it is that you're seeking money for. But again, look at your local counties give grants, local cities give grants, states give grants, and then the federal government also gives grants. So some of the county and the city grants are easier to get, but again, that compliance is just as hard as it is for the federal government.
Okay. So Mildred, good question. We'll take maybe a few more, just because we have 3 more minutes. How can nonprofits still charge for some programs?
Yes, they can.
Okay.
There's nothing in the 501c3 tax status that says a nonprofit can't charge to cover the cost of their program.
Okay.
The idea of a nonprofit isn't that you can't make a profit.
Okay.
The idea is that whatever profit you make goes back into the organization.
Okay. So Kalila, would the for-profit organization present a sponsorship proposal, or would they present a grant proposal to the fiscal agent? Good question.
That's a really good question. And I think the first thing you have to do is, before you write a grant proposal or a sponsorship proposal, is talk to the fiscal agent. That's the first thing you want to do. Go in and have a conversation and say, here's what we'd like to do. Is this something you'd be interested in? And they'll tell you, okay, we'd like you to either write a grant for that, or we'd like to partner with you and apply for this grant together.
Okay.
That's really important to find out from them.
Okay. So it might be different for each one, basically.
That's right.
I think this will be our last question, just because it seems so simple. I don't know why we didn't think of it. Somebody asked, where is it? It was so typically, I can't find it, but you remember asking this question. Typically, how long is a grant proposal?
How long is the length of the proposal itself?
Yeah, is it a few pages? Is it 10 or 20?
That's a good question. So it really depends on the funder.
Okay.
So I remember initially I talked a little bit about that common grant application. Uh-huh. This is where all your writing skills are going to come into use, because they only give you 250 words or less to describe what it is that you're trying to do.
Okay.
So they have word limits in that. So in that respect, some of them are very short, but they have to be very concise.
Okay.
In other applications, it doesn't necessarily say it'll give you like 3,000 words or less, right? So some grant applications end up being like for the federal government or for the city government, when I talk about city grants, those grant applications were like 50 pages each, right? So one year I actually did 4 of them and I thought I was going to lose my mind. And I didn't get any of them, by the way. I didn't get a single dollar.
You're like,
So it really depends. The federal grants, the state grants, and the local grants, they require a lot of paperwork, and they're going to be longer. But a lot of the corporate grants, they are shorter, and they do give you word limit. So, and by the way, if you go over the word limit, they'll cut you off.
Wow.
So just be mindful of that as you go through that process.
So wasn't this awesome? So you guys already know. It was. I told you, Catherine was like, is it going to be? I'm like, it's always fun. So what I would love, I like to end with this. So how about this? I always try to end with this. One, I want you guys, to let Catherine know how much you appreciate her in the comments, because people love to read all the good stuff. Like, you were amazing. She can read it. We're watching you right now. So you've got about 5 seconds to do that. And then 2, I've added Catherine to the Dream Builder group. Now, Catherine is the CEO. Oh, president. What do you got?
I am the president and CEO.
Oh, okay. So Catherine is the president and CEO. So she might not get to 20,000 comments, but inside the Facebook group, I want you to head on over after you give like all the praise inside the comments here. I want you to head on over, and it's Catherine Wilson. So you can tag her. And remember, we're going to use our hashtag #AskTheExpert and share one key thing that you learned. Because when you teach and you share, you learn twice, right? And so I want you to post in the group and just say, hey, tonight's Ask the Expert, I learned XYZ. Thank you, Catherine. #AskTheExpert. So I can see and Catherine can see. I literally added her to the group. So see, Catherine, all the love.
Yeah, look at that, bosses.
I know.
I'll tell you, when we started, we were just talking about this earlier. When we started, we were not bosses of anything. But it's amazing to see how far we came in just a 5-year period. And this is like really still just the beginning.
Yeah, like you don't realize your relationships are so critical, because now I can call on Catherine and ask her, like, I could not imagine calling on the president and the CEO of a major nonprofit and be like, hey, what are you doing Sunday night? Like, that's not gonna happen. I can't do that. But I'm not calling. I called Catherine, my friend, someone who I've built a genuine relationship with. You see why relationships are so critical and so important. And there's a great book called Delivering Happiness. If you have not read it, you should. It's by Tony Hirsch. Starts with the H. I'll post a link in the video in the academy. But Delivering Happiness, and he is the man that owns Zappos. It's like he's a billionaire. And what he talks about is that how to build genuine relationships, and from that, business might blossom.
Yeah.
But that's not the purpose of the relationship.
Yeah.
And typically they say it takes about a year of a genuine relationship for it to blossom, if it's going to, into some sort of professional relationship. So,
well, that's like when I talked a little bit about when you go into the meeting with the funder, don't ask them for money in the first meeting. You can't. That's not the foundation of a good relationship.
She sounds so quiet and so humble.
Oh,
She's
thank you.
My Catherine's not quiet. Don't let her. She's humble, but she ain't quiet. Oh, Dolores, mentor me, please. Thank you so much. Oh, I always just love the awesome feedback. So love the growth. Yeah.
Somebody said they wanted to see this in like a class or something.
Yeah. So I already reached out to Catherine to see if she could teach a grant writing class. She teaches them in person, right?
I do teach them in person.
Yes.
Yeah,
so we're gonna try to see if I can get you guys a little hookup. All right. Remember, so go inside the Facebook group, our private Dreamcatcher group. Use the hashtag #AskTheExpert. Tag Catherine Wilson, and just share one core thing that you learned tonight. And I want to say thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody.